So, dear students and online participants, welcome to the last lecture of this series before the summer break. And for today, I am very pleased to warmly welcome my dear colleague, Professor Thomas Schomerus from Leuphana University in Lüneburg, Germany. And Thomas and I have been cooperating for already many years, and we also produced 10 years ago a book on renewable energy law in the European Union. But Professor Schomerus is truly an expert in many fields of environmental and energy law, including environmental procedural rights law. And for the latter, it is important to share with you that Thomas acts as an elected member to the well-known Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee based in Geneva, Switzerland. However, today, Professor Schomerus will address another topic of environmental law, which is EU energy efficiency law. Thomas contributed a chapter on this topic to the research handbook on EU environmental law, but since then, many developments took place. So, dear Thomas, we very much look forward to hearing your thoughts on this very important theme. Energy efficiency is so much needed to bring down greenhouse gas emissions. So if you're ready, you can take the floor. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Marianne. It's a pleasure and an honor to speak to you at the Maastricht University. And I still remember my visit in Maastricht, and I really appreciate your university very much. And I appreciate that you have this row of lectures here on EU environmental law and so on. And thank you for the nice introduction. Just a second. I think you already introduced me. I won't tell too much about myself here, but just to tell you that I'm actually in Geneva at the moment, speaking to you from the United Nations building, because we have the session of our Aarhus Convention Compliance Committee here. It's 4 times a year, and it takes 1 week each. So it's very intensive, and so I just left the session and to give this presentation to you on the topic of environmental energy efficiency law, with opportunities and barriers, which I would like to tell you something about. And I can also see that there are students, at least one student I can see from my university. So welcome to you as well, and welcome to everybody. So what I would like to talk about is give you some more theoretical, some kind of theoretical introduction to the fundamentals of energy efficiency and energy saving. I think this is important to mention. It's not only about energy efficiency, but also about energy saving. And I would then talk about the legal aspects, about European law, and eventually I will talk about the national implementation of the European energy efficiency law, with a special focus on the German Heating Act, which was an example for a really severe political confrontation. So what you can see on this picture here is a ranking of EU countries according to the stringency of measures regarding reducing energy demand, and it's from the European Environmental Bureau. I won't comment this here, but you might see that the lighter green countries are supposed to do better here than the darker countries. So energy efficiency and energy saving does not stand alone, of course. It's part of the whole picture of energy transition. It's only one aspect, and I won't mention all these aspects here, but I think it is important to see that and to keep in mind that we have everything is connected, and you're looking at energy transition and then the bigger picture of sustainable development. We have to look at all these different aspects. Of course, tackling climate change and with renewable energies and so on. But what we also need, of course, and that's where we as universities are challenged, is research. We need a lot of research in energy, not only technical, but also sociological and legal research, of course. And I think we are really challenged here to bring all these topics forward. Our task is to give advice to politics, to politicians, to the decision makers. And I think we could even do more about this year. So this is not an isolated topic. That's what I want to say. So it's all it's part of a much, much bigger picture. And looking at the European Union, we could say that energy efficiency and energy saving form the first fuel. So it's very easy. The energy we do not consume is the best. And this is why the European Union also put energy efficiency first as a guiding principle. I would say they should maybe also have said energy efficiency and energy saving first, because energy efficiency, in my eyes, is not enough. But I really appreciate the European approach here. And the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is the overarching energy efficiency and mainly energy efficiency law in Europe, it looks at a holistic approach, taking into account, as it said here, the overall efficiency of the integrated energy system, the security of supply, cost effectiveness, and so on. I won't mention that all here. But looking at what are the effects of energy efficiency and saving, of course, there are a lot of economic effects because we can save money by consuming less energy. Energy security is also a very high-ranked topic here, and especially nowadays with the political changes in the geostrategic changes in Europe. We have to lower the dependency on energy imports, not only, but also, of course, from Russia. And so we need fewer investments in energy infrastructure, for instance, in grid extension. And of course, there are environmental effects because the energy we do not produce, for instance, with coal-fired power plants, improves air quality. And in the end, of course, it's about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So what does it involve? So energy efficiency is about an input-output ratio. So the ratio of output of the performance, service, and so on to the input of energy. And energy savings, that is the amount of energy which is actually saved. I would say energy saving should be understood as any reduction of energy use, and simple decoupling effects may not be sufficient. What we see here on this graph is that we had very good decoupling effects indeed in the European Union. So this bottom line here is the final energy demand, and the upper green line is the GDP. So we have an increase of GDP, which is much higher than the relatively slight increase in energy demand, which is good, yes. So energy an overall energy system efficiency means to shift energy consumption also to times when energy generation is greater than the demand. So it's not only just about making producing more energy efficient appliances and so on. It's also about a time shift. And net energy, of course, means a bit more. So there is a trade-off between energy, which is, for instance, embodied in insulating houses, and the operational energy used for heating and so on. And so we have to look at the whole picture. That's what I would like to say here. And looking at where is energy or how much energy is consumed for heating or cooling, it's about 50% in the EU. And over 70% of all this energy comes from fossil fuels, which is mostly natural gas, but also oil. And looking at the energy consumption per capita here on this map, we can see that the Scandinavian countries have a relatively high energy consumption. I think that's obvious because it's colder in the north. I think that's a very simple explanation here. Yeah, but we have to keep in mind that energy or that heating and also cooling are the most important parts of energy consumption. And then we have this expression of energy intensity, which actually has improved over the last years. And it is defined as the energy efficiency of a country's economy, showing the amount of energy which is needed to produce a unit of the GDP. And it has improved, as I said, because there was a shift from industry, which is high energy consuming, to services. And we have fewer, and it's therefore fewer energy intensive activities. And inefficient units might have been closed, and also we have more energy efficient appliances. So there's a high economic potential of energy efficiency measures. But it's important to mention that the benefits of energy efficiency should outweigh the cost of the energy efficiency measures, which is not always the case, I'm afraid to say. Now coming to some targets here in this area, target strategy and instruments. And this is from the Energy Coalition EU, this picture here. So it just simply says the higher the 2030 EU energy efficiency targets, the higher the benefits are. It's a very simple, opinion. And then we have the Energy Efficiency Directive, which was recasted in the last year, which does set highly ambitious energy efficiency targets for 2030, which is of course embedded in the Green Deal. And so the previous targets were that we want not consume more than 1 million tons for primary energy and 846 million tons for final energy. And these targets have been lowered to, as you can see, 990 for primary and 763 for final energy, which is, I think, really good. But most of the targets, or many of the targets, are not absolute, but relative targets, which we can see here at Article 4, paragraph 1 of the directive, which says that member states should ensure a reduction of energy consumption of at least 11.7% in 2030 compared to the projections of the 2020 reference scenario. So this is not an absolute target here. And of course, there are targets for specific public sectors, which is also important because the public sector should be a role model here. and member states have a target for cumulative end-use energy savings. So, and as I already said, there must always be a cost-benefit analysis. And we could also look at the Repower EU strategy. So, because of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, of course, and energy efficiency is one of the most effective and sustainable ways to discontinue the reliance on Russia, for instance. So, about the setting of these targets, as I already said, science, universities are challenged here because the targets are demanded very often by science. Just the planetary boundaries, which here come from this picture comes from the Stockholm Resilience Center. This is, I think, a very good idea to look at. And then these scientific ideas, they then further on are rendered down to political targets. For instance, the Fit for 55 target within the Green Deal, or the Sustainable Development Goals. And which you can see on the right side, there is the goal number 7, which says ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So these are kind of political targets. They are not legally binding. And these targets then must be set by law. So science, politics, and law. And then they must be binding, and of course, they must also be implemented. Yeah, and we have relative targets, as I already said, which are based on decoupling effects, which is good. I don't say it's not good. But relative targets does not mean that in absolute numbers there is a reduction of energy consumption. And therefore, we also need absolute targets, which means a real reduction in energy consumption. This is what we finally need for sustainable development. And a short excursus here, how to address this in the law. So we have soft approaches here. Soft law, better regulation, self-regulation, deregulation, or whatever, responsive law. So voluntary agreements, maybe organizational regulations, informational instruments, and so on. But we also have the hard approaches like command and control, like direct behavior control. So it's forbidden to use certain energy, like it's forbidden to use oil, for instance, or indirect behavior control through economic instruments. And there we have management by quantity, like certificates with a cap and trade system, or we have a price management scheme, which by raising taxes, for instance, or on the other hand, also providing subsidies for consumers. So we have to look as lawyers and as tool makers, what is the best instrument here for reaching the energy efficiency and energy saving goals. And again, this is a bit similar. So what we need is, as I said, targets set by set by the law, so relative and absolute targets. To implement these targets, we need also their strategies, like the sustainability strategies of efficiency, sufficiency, and consistency. And then we need legal instruments in the law. And these instruments must be implemented. And then we have in the implementation, especially of energy efficiency instruments, we have problems like the rebound effect and a relocation effect. And so to tell you about the rebound effect, which is which actually can undo the success achieved through energy efficiency measures. And this guy here, William Stanley Jevons, in the 19th century, has already discovered this effect. So, which means that an increase in energy efficiency measures can lead to an increase in the consumption of energy, for instance. And this effect is very hard to address in the law. I have no perfect instrument, how to address it, but we have to keep it in mind. And the rebound effect, for instance, means that the proportion of energy saved at the technical level is offset by the increase in demand. So there's a direct rebound effect, for instance. Let's say we have much better lighting, LED lights, but we don't switch off the light anymore. And there's an indirect rebound effect. So by saving energy, we save money, and we use this money for non-sustainable purposes, maybe. So this can even lead to a backfire effect, so that energy efficiency measures lead to the consumption of more energy. So this is, as I said, it's hard to address. And relocation effects are also to be looked at. So if we look at certain instruments aimed at sustainability in one area, this might trigger unplanned displacement effects or relocation effects in other areas. So a temporal shifting, for instance, of sustainability problems, we shift some problem to future generations, or a sectoral effect. So we switch to electromobility, but then we have problems with regard to resource conservation for specific metals and so on, or a resource-related relocation effect. So we save fossil fuels by switching to renewables, but this leads to landscape consumption by wind turbines and so on. So nature protection or nature conservation may suffer. And spatial relocation effect, so an increase in raw material productivity at home may be partially bought by importing products manufactured abroad, which are not manufactured according to our European standards. So this is about, let's say, the beginning here, or the fundamentals of energy efficiency and saving. Now coming to the law, of course, more specifically, and the major basis in EU primary law is Article 194 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which describes the goals of EU energy policy, not only energy efficiency, but also energy saving is mentioned here. And as I said, energy efficiency is a relative energy saving due to decoupling effects. Energy saving is an absolute reduction of energy usage. And I would say, if we look at both here, which we have both mentioned in Article 194, paragraph 1c, and we look at it through the lens of sustainability, I would say that energy saving should have priority over energy efficiency. Of course, this is not mentioned, or this is not laid down in Article 194, but sustainability, the principle of sustainable development, is of course a core element of the European primary law. And so what I would also say is that this requires European legislation. So it's not sufficient if should member states individually just set up such laws. No, it requires EU-wide clear targets legislation. Doesn't mean that certain member states may go beyond that, according to Article 191, for instance. But I would also say that energy efficiency and saving laws, EU laws, do not fall under Article 194, paragraph 2 and sentence 2, which says that these measures should not affect a member state's right to determine the conditions for exploiting its energy resources, choice between different energy sources, the general structure of energy supply, which would mean a veto right of member states. No, it does fall under the principle of qualified majority. That's what I think that's for me, that's relatively clear. And then we have the already mentioned Energy Efficiency Directive, which I would just highlight here one or the other sector. So the public sector should lead on energy efficiency, should be a role model. So the public sector has higher targets than others. We also have an exemplary role of public bodies buildings, which should then which also have a higher targets, a higher requirements. And public procurement is, of course, also another sector, which where only product, services, buildings, and so on with high energy efficiency performance should be procured. So the public sector is leading, or should be leading here in this area. And again here the energy efficiency first principle is mentioned, and so on. And it's also made clear that these are minimum requirements, and that they shall not prevent member states from maintaining or introducing more stringent measures here. And then we have further instrument, and one, I think, very interesting instrument is the Energy Obligation Scheme, with targets of new annual savings of, for instance, between this year and next year of at least 1.3%. And the scheme imposes energy saving obligations on energy distributors and retail companies and so on, to save energy, also to sell less energy. And this is a bit of a bias here, because to require companies to sell less, it's difficult. This is not according to what company wants. They want to sell more. So this, I would say, this energy obligation scheme is not very attractive, although it is in one or the other way implemented by at least 16 member states. But there are also alternative policy measures possible, and that's what the German government, for instance, said. Well, they said, well, we have already reached this target, so we don't need an energy obligation scheme. And then other instruments are, of course, audits, which are important. Metering, smart meters. The rollout of smart meters is still lacking in many member states, especially in Germany. So smart meters enable us to improve energy efficiency and energy savings by, for instance, demand-side management. So we could, let's say, switch off deep freezers in 20 million households for 1 hour. That would save a lot of energy. when in times when we have not enough energy produced. Yeah, billing information for customers is important. So customers should know where the energy they consume comes from. Also, the general consumer information, empowerment of consumers. Consumer behavior is, of course, of utmost importance here. And then we have financing instruments. We have the National Energy Efficiency Fund and so on. So it's a collection of various instruments here. So this is the overarching Energy Efficiency Directive, but there are more special European secondary laws here. For instance, the Ecodesign Directive, which I really appreciated. The old Ecodesign Directive it more or less only addresses energy efficiency. And so we have Commission regulations under this current directive for lighting products, which were the first products falling under this new law, refrigerators and welding equipment and so on. So I would say that more or less all electric and electronic appliances fall under such Commission regulations addressing energy efficiency. But the new now, a new Ecodesign regulation has was passed, which opens up new opportunities for more comprehensive sustainable product strategy and policy, which goes far beyond energy efficiency. Coming to this in a minute, but this is just an example for a delegated act here for vacuum cleaners, for instance, which are, I won't mention the details here, but you can see that it's about energy efficiency requirements. Yeah, and what I said, just recently on May 27, the European Council gave the final green light to the new Ecodesign Regulation. So it's a regulation, not a directive anymore, so directly binding for the member states. This is doesn't mean very much here, because the actual the important law is made for the various appliances via delegated acts from the Commission. But what is more important is the extension of the scope. So all physical goods are now covered by this new regulation. And also, the eco-design requirements are much broader now. So it's about durability, reliability of products, reusability, repairability, maintenance, and so on. So it's more or less the whole life cycle, the whole sustainability, all the sustainability aspect of products. And we will also have a digital product passport, which I also appreciate. The major problem here is that this is just a kind of mother law. But what we need is daughter laws, so delegated acts of the Commission. And the Commission has to set up a priority list, what to address first. And this is something I think where we also, as legal scholars, could give our say, because it's very important which products are really going to fall under this new regulation. So you can see here what's in Article 1 mentioned. I won't repeat that. So what I'm saying is eco-design requirements are necessary for sustainable product development and sustainable development in general. And it is embedded in various EU initiatives here regarding sustainable products. And as I already said, the EU is in charge. National level is not sufficient. And also, we must, of course, look at the global market. The EU is only one player here. what we need is an international level playing field for sustainable products. And this is, of course, still lacking here. And the consumers are important. We need better consumer information awareness, for instance, via this new product passport. So, and then we have energy efficient buildings, which form a core element here of energy transition in general. So we have a revised energy performance of buildings directive from this year. So binding targets for to decrease at the average energy performance of national residential building stock by 16%, and so on. So enhanced standard for new buildings, zero emission buildings. We need national building renovation plans. We need improved energy performance certificates, and again, passports, building renovation passports. Solar technologies should be installed on all new buildings. One-stop shops are mentioned here, and for instance, also the rollout of recharging points for electric vehicles. So it's all connected. So we have to connect buildings with transport and so on. I think this is maybe the most important point here: buildings, because heating in northern Germany and cooling, of course, as well in the south is the most important here. And so we have a differentiation between new buildings and existing buildings. New buildings must be zero emission buildings from 1st January 2028 on. New buildings, of course, it's easier to install all kind of insulation and what you need. This photo here, by the way, this is the new house which my son and his family are building at the moment. And it is a zero emission building. It has a heat pump, it has solar and solar photovoltaic, solar thermal. It is perfectly insulated and so on. So with ground floor heating and all that. It's energy autonomous. It doesn't need external energy anymore. So they produce everything on their own, and I'm a bit proud of it. But honestly, it's quite expensive to have such a building. But of course, existing buildings, there are certain minimum energy performance requirements when they are renovated. But there are no, you cannot turn existing buildings, normally at least, to zero energy buildings or zero emission buildings. This would take too many efforts and too much effort, and it is not cost effective. But of course, of course, it's very expensive. I mean, we have a house which was built 1950 after the war, and it takes I can tell you a lot about that. Yeah, but it's so there must be such a differentiation. I think this is also required by I would say basic law and so on. So now coming to my last point here, which is the example of the German Heating Act. As I said, there was an enormous political uproar last year about it, and because actually it was I will tell you about it. It was a communication problem mainly, and I think my German students who here know about that. But so it's the so-called Heating Act, the Gebäudeenergiegesetz, or the GEG, which is about to implement the energy performance of buildings directive, and of course the Energy Efficiency Directive. So, and it differentiates between new buildings, which must be built according to the lowest standards. And you can also, renewables can be credited here. and existing buildings when they are renovated. And this act is immensely complex. There's a lot of calculation in it, and as you know, we have to read the saying "Judex non calculat," which means a judge. I'm a former judge. Doesn't calculate. I have written part of this commentary here. I'm a co-author of this book here. But I must honestly confess that many of the sections in this law I do not understand. Sorry about that. But it is really very, very complex. And so I understand a bit that people say, we don't understand this. We don't understand why they do this here. And so the aim, according to Section 1, is to achieve national climate protection targets, economic, socially acceptable efficiency enhancing measures, and so on. There's also the principle of economic efficiency. And then here in paragraph 3, we have a kind of standard formulation in several German laws now, which also derives from European law, that renewable energies and energy efficiency is so important that it is an overriding. It is in the public interest. There's an overriding public interest in these measures, and they also save public safety or security. This is we also find this in the Renewable Energy Act and so on. This act, as I said, is very complex. So why was there this public uproar then? So it's about the required replacement of fossil fuel heatings. And we should know that the heating system in Germany is almost 50% based on natural gas, which came to the greatest extent from Russia. We have gas heating at home, and I always felt bad about consuming Putin gas. Not just since the war, no, before that. It's not good, but it's that's how that's what most almost half of German households consume, and oil, and there are very few renewables in the heating system, very few. So then there's a differentiation again in this law between existing heating installations. There are operator obligations like maintenance, and there's a mandatory replacement obligation if the installation is older than 30 years, but with a lot of exceptions. And in 2044, this is the end of all fossil fuel installations regarding heating systems in the households. But as I said, there are many exceptions, especially for this replacement requirement. But people didn't understand that because this law is too complex. And the new heating installations, if you install a new heating, then from 1st January this year, that should consist of at least 60% renewables. And the problem is, of course, where to get these renewables. So solar thermal, heat pumps, and so on. It's very costly. But there are various exceptions, for instance, regarding district heating supply. So this political uproar was mainly based on bad communication. I think the Green Minister of Energy, Mr. Habeck, whom I do appreciate, I think he, whatever. But they didn't really they didn't really consider what this meant to 50% or even or more, to 75% of German households. This is and there was a press campaign by the Bild-Zeitung and others. There was a lot of political propaganda against this green law. So a major, I would say to a certain extent, a mistake, a deficit in the lawmaking, but the major deficit was in communication. How to tell people and how to, tell them, well, it's not as bad as you might think. And then this heating act is supplemented by the Wärmeplanungsgesetz, the Heat Planning Act, which means that there's now a mandatory comprehensive heat planning for all 11,000 municipalities in Germany. So, there's a connection to the Heating Act, because the obligations under this Heating Act, they only come into force when a heat planning is available in the municipality. And there are different time frames here regarding to how many inhabitants are there in the municipality. So over 100,000, they must have a heat planning by mid-2026 and others 2028. So this is based on the heat transition, which requires new technologies, seasonal heat storage, for instance, large heat pumps, using we have worked on, are still working on a project using the local river in my hometown Lüneburg as a source for heat with a heat pump. So there's and we have to be very innovative here. And this is, and you can imagine how the German municipalities are challenged by this new system, which this requirement. And I'm currently also, and we are writing a commentary on this. Hopefully, I think the first commentary on this act. So coming to the end now, it's almost 45 minutes. What I would, the question might be, is energy efficiency and energy saving possible through law? What can law contribute here? And first of all, there's no alternative to both. And we also see that the German example of this Heating Act shows that the implementation of such requirements require clear, comprehensible regulations, good communication. So the regulations must be understandable. This is really a challenge. And without acceptance, without public acceptance, no energy efficiency and no energy saving. The consumers are those who must save, in the end, energy. And then I talked about rebound displacement effects, which we cannot completely prevent. We need innovative ideas from our students, for instance, from legal scholars, how to address this. And so there's no ideal instrument. So we need smart, innovative, creative, hybrid instruments, and volume control, which I mean, regulation according to the methods. So like a cap and trade system might be superior to traditional command and control law. And so self-regulation in certain cases may be good. And but we also, as I said, rebound and displacement effect are often a consequence of traditional regulations. But sometimes we need command and control, of course. If we need a good mixture of all the different instruments. And the best solution would probably be a primary energy ETS. At the moment, we have an emission trade scheme, but it's about the emissions. What about primary energy? Wouldn't that be a good idea to have a cap and trade system for the primary energy. So, coming to the end now, this is a saying, I think that was a favorite saying from Angela Merkel, our former chancellor, quid agis prudenter agas ad respice finem, which means whatever you do it properly and look at the end. And this is, I think, what we should do in lawmaking and in inventing new ideas, legal ideas. So thank you very much indeed, and I'm really looking forward to your questions, to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Big applause for you. I'm sure you can hear that. You really mastered to lecture on a very complex topic in a very understandable way. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated.